Alright, what is up everybody? I'm back with another video, and in today's video we're going to do a reduced state table problem. So we're going to use this chart on our left and this graph on our right to find the reduced state graph and find more better and efficient equations to use to better sum up this table on the left, right? So let's get right into it. So this is how our state graph is going to be drawn out. So if we see from the top, the A is missing, so the A gets cut out, and on the bottom the H gets cut out. So the first letter on the vertical gets cut out and the last letter on the horizontal gets cut out, so from A to H. So the first letter vertically gets cut out and the last letter horizontally gets cut out, and then we're left with this pyramid scheme type of structure. All right, so knowing that, let's get right into the video and how to solve this problem. So let's start off by first highlighting what ones are the same. So we're going to use a yellow highlighter, and we know that state A, state B, state C, state E, and state H all have the same outputs, right? So they all have 0 as output. So we're going to highlight all those as they're going to be similar. Then we're also going to highlight the rest of them. So we know state D, state F, and state G are all the same because they have the one output, right? So we're dealing with two different types of outputs, and that's the first step that we're going to do is we're going to highlight all the ones that are the same. So A, B, C, E, and H are 1, and D, F, G are also 1 because their outputs are the same, right? So let's start off with B. So we're going to start off with B over here, and we know that B and A, we're going to see if B and A are the same. So B is 0, right? And A is 0. So we know that they're both highlighted by the same color. So we know that they're the same. So in this circle, what we're going to do is at B, we're going to write down the B's next state values at the top. So for B, we have A and B over here, right? So we're going to write A and B at the top, right? A and B. And then for A, we're going to write their letters at the bottom. So for A, we have B and F. So we're going to write B and F, right? So that is how we filled out the first box, right? For BA, we have AB at the top to represent the B part, and for the horizontal part, A, at the bottom, we have B and F to represent their next state values. Now moving forward, we have C and A, and if we look back at our chart, we see that C and A have the same color highlighted because their both outputs are the same. So for C, we're going to do the same thing. On the top part, to represent the vertical section, we have GE, so we're going to write down GE in the top of this square. And at the bottom of the square to represent A, it's going to be BF once again, right? Because the horizontal didn't change. We're still at A. Now if we go with C and B, we see that C and B are also the same because they're highlighted the same color as yellow. So we're going to do the same thing. So for C at the top, we're going to write GE, GE. And at the bottom, we're going to write AB to represent the B side now. So B is AB on the horizontal. So at the bottom, we're going to put AB, right? You guys kind of get the drift of where I'm going here. So we're going to go ahead and fill out the rest of this chart. I'm going to speed it up a little bit. So at D and A, we see that D and A are different colors. They're not the same color. So what we're going to do is we're going to write an X throughout the whole square, right? So we will not use the square. Because D and A do not have the same color, we will not use that square. D and B do not have the same color, so we're not going to use this square either. D and C do not have the same color, so we're not going to use this square either. We're just going to write a big whole X throughout it, right? So that's what we get. Because they're not the same color, then we just write an X throughout. Now when we get E and A, we see that they are the same color, so we write down the same thing for E. So horizontally E, we have FC, right, as the next state values, FC. So we're going to write an FC over here. And then for A, we're going to write BF at the bottom. For EB, we see that they're the same color. So for E, we're going to write FC at the top. And then for B, we're going to write AB at the bottom. We have EC. They're the same color once again. So we're going to write FC at the top. C, we're going to write GE at the bottom. And then E and D are not the same color. So because they are not the same color, they're different highlighted colors, we're going to write a big X throughout this square. Right? So moving forward, let's see what else we have now. We have F and A. F and A are not the same color, so we're going to have a big X over here. F and B are not the same color, so another big X. F and C are not the same color, another big X. F and D are the same color as we can see here. So for F and D, we're going to write the same thing. So F, we're going to put ED on the top because they are the same color. So that means they can coexist. So ED at the top. And D, we have HF at the bottom, right, to represent the horizontal side. And F and E are not the same color. So we're going to go ahead and write down a big old X once again. Now G and A are not the same color. Another big X. G and B are not the same color. G and C are not the same color. G and D, however, are the same color. So now we know that they can coexist. So for G and D, we're going to write the G part on the top part, as that is the vertical. So we're going to represent this as CG. And at the bottom part, we're going to write down HF to represent D on the horizontal section, right? Then we have G and E, which are not the same color, which is a big X. And then we have G and F, which are the same color. So we're going to write CG on the top to represent the G on the vertical. And to represent F on the horizontal, we're going to write ED at the bottom. Right? Now we're on to our last row. So we have H, we have HA, which are the same color. Right? So HA are the same color. So we're going to go ahead and write down HDH on the top. And to represent A on the bottom, we have BF. Then we have HB, right? So on H, we have DH on the top again. And then B, we have AB at the bottom. Then we can kind of get the gist of it that HC are the same. So DH on the top and then GE on the bottom to represent the C. HD are not the same as they're different colors. So we're going to go ahead and put a big X on that one. HE are the same color. So we're going to have DH on the top. And then to represent E, we're going to have FC on the bottom. HF are not the same color. So we're going to write down a big old X over there. And HG are not the same color. So we're going to write down a big old X over there, right? So this right now, what we have so far is what we refer to as the first iteration of the reduced state table. So this is the first iteration. And now we're going to go ahead and do the second iteration. So let's use a different color right now. Let's use the red one, right? So what we did right now is the first iteration. And now we're going to do the second iteration. So now instead of using the outer part of the graph, we're going to go inside. So if we analyze this box right here, if we go right here on this B box, right? So if we go to this B box right here, right? And we look in what's inside of it. Let's look at the vertical column. So we have A and B and F. So what we're going to do is we have A and B. So we're going to go on our chart, right? And we're going to do A and B match. So if we go down to A and B, we see that when there's an A here and there's a B, we see that there are letters inside and there's not a big black X over it. So we know that it's good so far. So we look at the vertical column. Then we look at the B and F portion. So if we look at the B and F portion, when we go down to B, right? If we go down to B and we go up to the F section, we see that there's a big black box. So because there's a big black box under B and F, we end up crossing off the whole box. So we cross off the vertical first. And if we cross off one vertical, we end up crossing off the whole box. All right? Does that make sense? We end up crossing off the whole box because one of the vertical columns does not fit. So if we go down to this section now, if we go to C, if we go down to G and B, so if we go to G, or if we go to G over here, right? If we go down to G and B, we see that there's a big black box here. So because one of the columns are wrong, we end up putting a big red X over it to cancel out the whole box. And then we go on further doing the same thing. So let's do one more. We have G and A, right? So if we go to G and A, we see there's a big black box here. So we can cross off this column. And we don't even have to bother checking the second column because since the first column was already crossed off, we end up putting a big black X, red X through it. Well, because once again, because a black X is between G and A. So now, as you can see, we go further in depth for the second iteration as we go inside the specific boxes that we have created. So let's go ahead and do that for the rest. So if we go to E, let's go to F and B. So at F and B, we see that there is no problem because they don't ever really see one another. F and B don't really connect, so we leave that for now. If you go to C and F, we see that there's a big black box here for C and F, so we cross that out. So then we end up giving a big red X once again. For the next part, we have F and A. F and A, there's a big red box over here. So we can cross out this column and then cross out the entire box. For F and G, we see that there's nothing wrong as it's already connected. So because F and G is connected, there's nothing wrong. Then if you go to C and E, we see that in C and E, there's nothing wrong as there's no black box over it. So we leave this circle intact, right? So if we go further on, we go to F, E and H. If we go to E and H, there's nothing, no big block, there's no big black X over there. So we're fine. If we go to D and F, we see that there's no big black X over there. So we're also fine. So that box is also intact. Further on to the G row, C and H over here, there's nothing wrong. There's no black X over it. G and F, there's nothing wrong as there's no black X over this box right here, right? So this box is okay. Then we go to C and E. C and E, there's no black X, so we're fine. G and D is no black X, so we're fine. So these boxes are all right. Go further down to H, D and B, right? In D and B, is there a black X? Yes, there is. There's a black X right over here in D and B. So end up crossing out this whole box right here. Is there a black X on D and A? D and A, yes, there is a black X over here. So we end up crossing out this one. How about D and G once again? D and G is okay, right? Because there's no black X over it. H and E, is there one at H and E? H and E is fine. So we don't have to cross out this box over here. Now D and F once again, there's nothing wrong with it. There's no black X. H and C, there's nothing wrong with it as there's no black X. So then all these boxes are now intact. So after completing the second iteration, we are now kind of complete with our state graph, right? So what we're going to do now is further reduce it and list the state merges below. Now, how do we list the state merges below? So if we look at it from a vertical standpoint, let's look at it like this. So from C, D, and E, and F, right? So these are the only 4 columns left that have blue letters in it without any X's through them, right? So let's connect it. We have C, E, H, right? So for this column right here, right, we write a C dash. It's connected with E, right? This point is connected with E, right? And it's also connected with H, right? So we put C dash E dash H, right? So that represents that column. Now let's look at this column over here, right? So we start with D, right? And we start with D. So then we end up putting D with F, right? Because there's an F over here, D and F. And then we have D and G, right? Over here as it connects these 2 boxes. D and F and G. So we end up putting a dash G over here. Now we can go forward further. So we have another box over here, which is E and H. And we have another box over here, which is F and G. But we don't have to necessarily include the E and H separately or the F and G separately because there's already included in this equation right here. So the E and H and the F and G are already included as there are no new letters present. So we don't necessarily need to add those separately, right? So these are our 2 state merges below that we have. So we necessarily can label this as 2 3-way state merges. So we have C, E, H, D, F, G. Now, essentially what this means is that the C becomes everything. So if C equals to CEH and E equals to CEH and H equals to CEH. So essentially they all become one. They all become their own entity, right? So they're not separate anymore and they're all the same part of the same group. And that goes the same for the next part. So D is the same as D, F, G. F is the same as D, F, G. And G is the same as D, F, G. So all these single letters then become 3 letters as one group, right? So now let's start to do our reduced state table. So this is what our reduced state table is going to look like. We're going to have state, right? State, next state, and output. So then we'll label those like that. State, next state, and output. And this is what we have to do next, right? So if we start with the state, essentially what we're going to do is we're going to try to cover all these letters again, right? So let's start off simple. Let's start off with what we already know. Let's do CEH. So we have state, CEH, right? So basically what we're trying to do is cover all the letters. We want to do A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, as those are all the letters that are included over here. But if we do CEH, we already cancel off 1, 2, 3 letters already. We cancel off CEH already, right? So that's one thing that we had to do. So we have CEH, and in the next state portion at C and CEH, what do we have in the next state portion? So we look at CEH, let's see what we have in the next state portion, right? So if you have 3 letters in the state for CEH, in their first next state, right? In their first next state, we have C as the first next state to be G, and E we have this first next state to be F, and then H we have the first next state to be D. So basically what we do is we combine all these letters for CEH as the first next state, and we put DFG, right? Because those are all the first next states for C, E, and H. And now if we do the next states, we have E, C, H right here. So we can do H, C, E if we want to. Or we can stick to what we already have, which is CEH. So we can put CEH over here. So basically we add up all those letters that are in the next state of CEH over here is ECH. And we can put that in there. And the output for all of those is all the same. It's all 0, 0, and 0. So the output stays the same as 0, right? So that's our first state. That's our first state reduction in the table, right? And then now let's see what the next one is. Right, so if we go down further, let's start off with DFG, right? We have DFG over here, so let's put DFG. Right, so if we look at DFG, we see, if we erase this right now, if you look at DFG, right, the first next states for them are H, E, and C. So we just combine all those letters for DFG. So we have H, E, and C. And the state after that is F, D, and G. So essentially it's DFG again. So you could put D, F, G. And what's the output for them? So for the output for DFG, they all have the same output as 1, 1, and 1. So we can end up putting the output 1 over here. Right? Now, there's 2 more states that are missing, right? So if we count out our alphabet that is in that chart, we have A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, right? So if we cross off all the letters that we want to highlight, we know that we have C, right? We have C, we have E, F, G, H. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. The 2 states that we're missing is we're missing state A, right? And we're missing state B. So let's write state A now, because those are the only letters that we're missing in the state section. So if we have state A, let's go up. If we go A, we can see the next state is B, right? So we're just going to write down B. And then our next state for after B is F. Now, remember when we talked about it here, F is equal to DFG. So in this section, to represent F, we have to put the whole 3 letters as D, F, G. And what's the output of A? If we remember, the output of A is equal to 0. So we're going to end up putting a 0 in the output, right? Then we have one more state, which is B. And if we go to B, the next state is A, right? So the next state for B is A for the first one. And then after that, we have B again. And B is not part of any of these groups, so we just put a regular B. And the output for B is also 0. So we're going to end up putting an output 0 here. And then this essentially is what our final reduced state table looks like, right? So we have to do a first iteration with the black X's, a second iteration with the 3 red X's, and then we find our state merges below, right? By looking at what's left in the columns, going vertically and connecting them with the horizontal rows that are there. Then we have to remember that each single letter becomes 3 as it is not on its own entity anymore, as it becomes part of a group. So each letter is associated with 3 letters. And then we go ahead and fill out this reduced state table by replacing these single letters with the 3 letters that are there and using the next state option for this is for, I think, 0 and for 1, as it's written on this table over here, and we copy down their output. So this essentially is what the reduced state table looks like for a state reduction problem. All right, so if you guys understood this video and enjoyed, please make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. If you guys have any questions, please make sure to comment down below and I'll make sure to reply to you. And if you guys want me to cover any other topics specifically or specific questions that you want me to make a video on, please comment down below or email me at sharranacademy@gmail.com, and I'll make sure to make a video on that as soon as possible. Alright guys, thanks for watching.